All right, so today we are Monday, February 27th. I guess there it is. We've got a file to download, inspection rules. There's nothing too magical about this. It's just some data that we can use as a backdrop for what we're working on today, which is three things. We're looking at some tools for debugging, VBA. We're doing a little bit with error handling, and we're getting an introduction to user forms. So download this data, and we'll go ahead and get started with it. Cell is opening. Oh, you know what? So we've got a project that's due like Wednesday. This is not a trivial project. Let's take a minute and let me just give you, kind of a little guidance on that. Here's a time where if you have already started working on this project and got your mind into the game, literally the game, what I'm about to say will make sense to you. If you haven't started yet, hopefully you can remember what I've said long enough for it to make sense after you start. So there are two acts of randomization that you have to do, right? You have to randomly pick the face off the cube, and you have to randomly position that cube into the game. Which of those two is harder? Positioning the cube is way harder. Because once you put that cube in the game, you've got to take it out of play. Picking a number, random between 1 and 6, you can do that for each die, no problem. But let's go ahead and say we've got some dice numbered out here. I don't know. That's about 24. I don't know. Home. Let's put a little grid on this so it looks like a grid. And let's say I call this my dice array. I zoom in a bit. 0, 1. How close did I get to having my 25 elements? Pretty close. I got to 22. 23, 24, 24, that's it. Okay. So let's suppose I had some letters in here. I had A. Let's center these so they look at least a little bit reasonable. Okay. I've got an A, I've got an E, I've got an E, I've got a D, not dice, I've got a D. I've got an F, I've got an R, I don't know, I've got an I, an O, C. Okay, I've got some of these. Let's put some down here around 24. I've got a G, an X, O, and an R. All right. I've got some letters in here. In fact, maybe what I'll do is hide these guys in the middle so we can see all those ones. All right, then let's suppose that I've got some other location where I'm trying to put these. Here's the idea. I've already randomly selected one of my faces, and I've got them here, but they're in the order that they appear. They're always in that same order. I've got to now randomize these. So this is my game. Okay, so I'm going to give you an algorithm in English. You'll have to worry about getting into VBA. But here's a pretty clean approach to doing it. I'm going to start off by picking a random number between 0 and 24. Someone, give me a number. You, sir, in the front. Between 0 and 24.
24.
24. Let's pick something besides 24 this first time through. 17. Okay, pick some random number 17. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find number 17, and we're going to say it's got an E in it. And I'm going to say, great. Number 17, I'm going to copy the value from number 17. I'm going to put it over here in the first slot of my game. Now, I have used number 17. I got to not use that letter again. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy the value from 24, from the very end here. I'm going to copy that and put it right over the top of 17. Look, that E has been used. There's no reason to keep it around here. I'm going to copy the one from 24 and put it right there. Now, I've got a problem. I've just entered that cube into the game twice. That's okay. Because my next time through the loop, I'm going to pick a random number between 0 and 23. So even though that G is still there, it's out of play because I'm only going to select from the ones that are here. Number between 0 and 23? Say 6. 6? So 6 is my new number. So I find number 6 here. I put that into the game at the next position. I take the last one that I was on, and I copy that to that same location. And then I say, now I'm picking a number between 0 and 22. say 3. 3. Get a 3 in there. So this one goes into the game. This one goes between 0 and 22 that time. Goes here. And now I pick between 0 and 21. Do you see it?
This doesn't seem random to me. Because,
well, I mean, I know I told you to pick to the side.
But, because then it seems like the lower numbers have a higher chance of being chosen as we're slowly chopping off 24 to 22.
Ah, it is true that the lower indices have a higher probability of being chosen. But a higher probability of choosing in a later round. So yeah, okay. So if you're saying this isn't fair, which cell has the higher probability of going, in the last one? Where's the bias? It's not. No, there's no bias here at all. Because I am picking from a uniform distribution, I am picking one of the elements in that whole set to start with. They all have equal probability. Once I pick that one's gone. And now all of the rest of them, on that second draw, have equal probability of being drawn. I take it out, and now on the next round, all of the rest of them have equal probability of being drawn. It's true that I might pick the number 2 more often than 24. In fact, I'm probably very seldom actually going to pick 24. But when I pick one of these lower numbers here, I'm going to take the number that's from 24 and I'm going to put it right back into play. So the fact is, yeah, you're right. I'm much more likely to draw 2 than I am to draw 24. But the actual value that's in that location is going to change. Because the first time I draw 2, that one's out of play and someone else comes into his place. Or her place. 2 seems a little more like a feminine number to me, so it goes into her place. There's a question over here? Yeah.
So what happens though if it's so random picks the last number?
Oh, my heavens, that's happened at the very beginning. So what happens if our last one gets picked? What does the algorithm say? So here, 24 was what got picked. Algorithm says copy from what was in 24 and put it over here. Then copy from what is in the last element, 24, and put it where? Here, yeah. So I'm going to replace what's in 24 with what's in 24. It's entirely unnecessary, but it doesn't hurt to do it. And so you could code around it that says, don't do it on the case that you happen to be the last number, but it's not going to. It probably won't even save any time because it'll probably take you more time to actually do that check each time than it would to actually replace it on the rare occasion that you picked up. So yeah, it doesn't hurt it to go around to the top of it, but it's really not doing anything. Questions?
Sorry, just to clarify on that last one. So before you said if you pick like 21, you put the I over into the game, you take 24 and put it into 21, and the next time you would draw from the first 23 rows, correct?
Right.
So how come when you pick the last one, you still do from 24 rows?
Oh, no, you don't. The next time you go through, you still pick from one less.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so if I picked this one, the very first time I do this, I picked 24, I copy the G, put it here, replace the G with the G, and then I search from 23 down. That G's been used. Okay, so that's the English description of it. You'll need to figure out the VBA description. I guess I'll leave that on here. I'm going to upload this file, so I'll leave this here in case that might jog your memory. All right. So our main goal today really is debugging and error trapping, but I really need to introduce forms to you today. So we're gonna do some work with forms, so we've got something to do our debugging and error trapping with. All right. So the data that we have here, these are actually the points of inspection, the rules for inspection that are used by the city of Chicago for inspecting food, what they call food establishments. So they've got an army of sanitarians, is what the job title actually is. They got a clipboard. It's a digital clipboard nowadays. They show up unannounced at your restaurant, and they say, "I'm here for your inspection." And they start taking notes of things. They see a cockroach, that's going to cost you $100. Really, it will. And any violation that has a fee assigned to it, a fine that you have to pay for it, and it's not uncommon to have an inspection that will cost you several $1,000s if you are uncompliant in a few of these areas. Okay, so that's just what these data are. It's not especially important, but we're going to use this as the example of building a user form. You're familiar with Dialog Box. If I say Dialog Box, how many of you go, I'm not quite sure what that term means? So anytime you're on your computer and you say, I want to do something, and one of these pops open. This is called the Dialog Box. In Windows terminology anyway, and maybe it's more general as well. It just says, hey, I need some information from you, the user. You're going to give me some information. We're going to have a dialogue. Here's a box for us to have a dialogue with. So dialog boxes, there are several ways we can create dialog boxes in VBA. We can invoke some of these built-in dialog boxes. In fact, this very one, like open browse. We can invoke this dialog box directly. We can just say, that file open dialog box, just open it up. Another way that we can do it, and we have done it, is by using the message box. So just, message box. Oh, this is that Funk Res thing. Pay no attention to this. Let me close this. There we go. And zoom in a bit. Okay, so we could say message box, give it some thing. Hi. Well, usually we're getting some information, so I'll put a set of buttons to put here, VB, yes, no, cancel. So now when I run that, it says, hey, okay, I'm getting some information from having a dialogue. I'm saying hi to you, and you are telling me either yes, no, or cancel. Cancel. That was a nice greeting, but I'm going to cancel that greeting. Okay, that's another way for us to make a dialogue. But those are all kind of built in and don't have a whole lot of flexibility. What if we want to have something that's kind of all our own? A drop-down box where you can choose something, such as the category of a violation over here. You pick one of these categories, food protection, and it will show you all the rules that are in that category. There's no built-in dialog box that's going to do that for me. So if I want to make one of those up from scratch, I've got to create it by building a user form. That seems like a really weird name to me. I've said it now for 2 decades, and it still sounds weird to me. But here's how we do it. Typically, when we're writing code, we're going to say insert a module. That's what we've done forever, but not today. Well, we might do that today too. But we're going to come here to user form. Insert user form. And this then is going to give us a canvas here for us to work on. So here's the user form. It's pretty boring right now, but we could still play it. Push play, it'll show this user form. There it is, very boring. We'd like to be able to make it do a little more stuff here, but that's what we start with, blank form. We have objects, properties, methods, just the same way we do in the rest of VBA. So let's start by looking at the properties. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to close my project. I guess I'm not. I'm going to look at the properties down here. So see the set of properties available for this. I'm going to choose View, Properties. View Properties may be showing already. Properties window. And that's going to give me this dialog, or this little area here that gives me the properties. There's a couple properties I want to change about the form itself. The first one is its name. Well, it's almost any time I put something onto my form or the form, the name that it comes with is not worth keeping. It's just called user form 1. I'm going to call this FRM rules. This is the form that I'm going to display all my rules on. I'm not just going to call it rules because I'm probably going to have some kind of thing on my form that actually shows the rules. I want to name it rules too. In fact, we so often have things that we want to name the same name that we've come up with this convention. And the convention, it's somewhat standard, but you can make your own up. Just say, listen, if it's a form, I'm going to prefix it with these same 3 letters every time, FR. And we'll look at some of the other ones here in a minute. So that changes the name. It does not change the caption of this form. That's a different property. So I'll come here to caption, and I'll change this to Chicago Food Inspector Rules. I'm not really sure that's what they call it, but that property, the caption property, changing that here, will then change what shows up in the title box of this window. So, the form itself is an object, it has properties which I can access right here through the properties window. I'm changing. No, I want to change the background color. Border style, border back color. Change that back color to a different shade of green. Make it red if I want to. But I'm afraid what would happen if I made it red. See red. I don't want to see. And change various properties. Any questions so far? Okay. Now, if we don't want the form to be boring, we want to put stuff on it. Those are called controls. The things we put on the form are called controls. Now, you may already have this box showing, you may not, but if it ever disappears, you can bring it back with this little tool right here called the toolbox. To me, it looks vaguely communist. You've got a hammer with a wrench kind of cross. I was always a little nervous to click on it, but it's okay. Nothing bad's going to happen, I think. I'm going to kind of, hopefully I can make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, these tools are tiny. I'm even zoomed in and they're tiny. So, yeah, these are the built-in tools. Folks, these are not all the tools you have to choose from. These are the standard built-in tools that have to be there in Excel. If you want, there's more. You could right-click this and choose additional controls. And folks, there are many. There are many to choose from. Poor computer can't quite see them. Microsoft RDP client, whatever that is, that's available. Silverlight, Microsoft Silverlight. Hey, that's something they use for Netflix. I wonder if I can do Netflix. Probably take a little work, but it's possible. So these things are here. The Shockwave Flash object. Which ones show up here in additional controls depends on which ones are installed on the computer you're working with. So if you put something here, there's no guarantee that when that workbook goes somewhere else, it will work on the destination computer. See what I'm saying? And actually, I don't think any of these would work on the Mac. You threw it to a Mac. But the ones that are built in, they work on the Mac. They're always available. And we're going to limit ourselves to the ones that are right here. All right, so here's what I'd like to do. I would like to bring a button onto this form. The button just looks like a little rectangle. It's nearly impossible to see it over here, but and let's see if I can organize this the size it is when you. I think that's how it works. No. One more. Is it 3 wide or 4? 4 wide? How many wide is your view? How many wide are your tools? 4. It's 4? Okay. I think that's right. So this one here is the command button. It just looks like a little rectangle. Here's how you bring a control. Control is just an object that you put on the form. It seems like a weird word to me, control, but I've said it now long enough it sounds almost normal. It's a visual object that you place onto your form. I'm going to put it on the form by clicking the command button tool, and then I'm going to do a click and drag to make that button here on my form. And I'm going to change some properties. First, I'm going to change the name. It's called Command Button 1. That's a really bad name. Instead, I'm going to call it CMD OK, my OK button. I'm going to change the caption. Instead of button 1, it's going to say OK. I want that wide. It's a very wide button. OK. Now,
Where did you change the caption?
okay, so with the button selected, click on the button so it has little 8 handles around it, and come down to my properties, and there's a property called caption. So I've changed 2 properties. I've changed the name to CMD OK. I've changed the caption just to say OK. Now, I would like to make this button do something when the user clicks on it. Now, folks, so far, every time we've wanted to have code, write code that gets executed somewhere, we put it somewhere, and the user pretty well has to say, OK, run that code now. They might run it with a hotkey. They might run it by choosing macros and running the macro. They might run it by we put a button on the form on the page that runs it. But so far we've usually said, here's a block of code, you go run it. When we start working with forms, it gets a little bit different. Now, instead of having one block of code that manages this form, we're going to put little pieces of code in different places on the form. For instance, we want some code associated when this button gets clicked. So I'm going to double click this button. And that's going to bring open a code window. Here it is. We create a little module form, a little procedure for me. The module is already built into the form. I'm going to create a procedure. This procedure is the one that's going to run when the user clicks on that button. So all I'm going to say is, What's the name of this form? FRM rule dot hide. Incidentally, I could just say me dot hide. Me is a nickname for whatever rule this code is running on. So this code is sitting on whatever form this code is running on. So this code is running on a form named FRM rule. So if I say me.hide, it means the same thing as FRM rule.hide. The whole idea here for that shortcut is, if I have lots of code referring to the form itself, and I want to change the name of the form, I don't want to have to go and change all the code. And so me.hide will do the same thing. Okay, let's go ahead and run that. I'll go ahead and click on the play button. Now here's my dialog box. Comes up here, Chicago Food Inspector rules. If I click on OK, it hides the form. It executes the code that was in that little block. So far, so good. If you don't have this part working, now's the time to say, "Hey, come to my rescue." There's two of us over here. So you go to one, I'll go to the other. Pause the recording. Maybe we'll pause. No pause. Click here to pause. Up there. All right. Now, that's what we've done so far seems pretty reasonable. We double-click that button. It brought up some place for us to write code, and you run it. But the model for how I have code execute on a form is much more complex. What's actually happened here is I've made a pair. I have said, listen, and you can see it right here in the name of the procedure. When this object, cmd_ok, receives this event, click, then run this code. And so so anytime I say I want to make some code run, I have to say, all right, what is the combination I want? I think of the object, and then I have to think of the event. For a button, it doesn't seem too hard to pick, right? Click, you can click the button. There are so many more things that I can choose to respond to, even for a button. These two combo boxes have been here since the dawn of this class. Right here. We've been working in modules, and there's two combo boxes. One here, one here. I've never even mentioned them before. Here they are. That's because until we get to forms, they're really boring. But in forms, they're very interesting. This first one lists all of my objects that I have access to. So far, there's only two. One for the form itself, and then one for the one control I have on it, the one button. So I've got the command OK button checked here. But now I can take a look at the second combo box over here. These are the events that I have to choose from. And so, click is the one that I was on right now. But I can respond to all the rest of these things happening. Well, this seems strange. I can respond independently to when that button is active and the user presses a key down on the keyboard. That's an event. When the key comes up on the keyboard, that's a different event. When it receives the focus, I think that's enter. When it loses the focus, that's exit. How about this one? When the mouse button goes down. When the mouse button comes up. When the mouse moves even 1 pixel within the boundaries of the button, I can have code respond to that. Why would you want to do that? There might be a reason. Did someone say virus? Virus is very strong language, but let's go ahead and do that. Let's hit this one. I'm not sure why it came back to this. I'm going to double click my button again. And it has created, so I picked mouse move, and it created this sub-procedure right here. Now, the whole point here, and what I'm going to try to drive home with this example, is that normally you think of a button, you click on it, it does something. But in a user form, you have to say, it's not just the clicking that could be important. I have to pick the event I want to respond to. And in this case, it's the mouse move event. So when the mouse moves, even a single pixel over the top of that button, this code will get executed. So let's do something devious. Let's change something. Let's change some property of this button itself. I'm going to change. So I want to change the property of an object, cmd, OK, dot left. I'm going to change the left property of this button. What does the left property do? that says where that button actually starts on the screen. So it's going to get a new value. What's it going to be? Some random number. So RND gives me a random number between 0 and 1 times the width of my form. So me dot inside width. There's a width and an inside width. The only difference is you've got a border around the outside. The width of the form is the outside of the border. The inside width is the inside of the border. This is going to say, every time the mouse moves over this button, change where the button is. I mean, it's something that, well, actually, I think April Fool's Day is coming up. It's about a month away. You know, you might want to do this. You have you work at an office. Is Edna there, the accountant? She's the bookkeeper. Okay, now has it received the mouse move event? This mouse is moving all around it. By the way, is a mouse move event happening right now? Yeah, but who's receiving the mouse move event? The form is receiving the mouse move event. I'm going to make the button receive the mouse move event. Is it possible for me to click on this button? It's possible.
Yep.
What would have to happen for it to
You have to get on one.
I have to get it really fast and click? That won't do it. I can't be that fast. What has to happen is it has to move. Oh, there it was. It's got to move to a place that's right under the arrow, and I have to not move again. Aha. Oh! Okay? All right. So hey, let's see what, since we're at it. I don't quite like the fact that it pops off the screen here. Wait a minute, I think I'm on it. I think I hit spacebar and it will invoke it. Yeah, because it had the focus, so I could press the spacebar. Okay, so it's possible now for the left to go all the way up to the full width of the page. So I'm going to subtract off some of this. I'm going to reduce the possible by the width of the form minus the width of the button. CMD OK dot width. So now the furthest over it could possibly go is going to be enough room to actually still show the button. But I'm not satisfied moving it just left and right. What else do I want to do? Top be the inside height minus the height of the button. Let's do one more thing. Each time we move it, let's do this. CMD OK dot width equals what it used to be minus 1. Each time it moves, what's going to happen? A little bit smaller, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller. I don't have a whole lot of time. Let's do by 2. Okay, so now, when I move that, it's going to move up and down as well as left to right. And after I do it about 10 times, the user's going to go, is that? It is! Oh my gosh, the button's getting smaller. What am I going to do? Oh no. I got one more chance. Oh! Okay, so that's all fun and everything, but the point is, the normal behavior you're thinking of is click. But there are many events that I can make code respond to. You see the point? So I got to think in terms of, now, it's not just enough for me to think, what do I want the algorithm to do, which is what we've had to think about so far. Now I got to think about, how am I going to cut this up into different parts and put it in different places on the form so that it can do ultimately what I want it to do. I'm going to make one more change to this button just in case I ever actually need it for something. This button, so I've got the button selected. By the way, on your properties window, you can switch to a different object by this little drop-down list, if you're not on the OK button. I am going to change the default property to true. This is the default button now, which means when the user presses enter, it'll be the same as clicking on this button, even if I can't quite get to it. So I'll just be able to press enter, and it will invoke the code behind this button. All right, so here's what I'd like to do. I would like to have a box that shows all of the possible different, the possible violations that could happen at a restaurant in Chicago. That's the list that I have sitting right here. I would like to bring those onto my form so the user can select it. All right. So that's going to take a different, that'll take a different control. We'll bring on a different control. Now, how do I get back to my form? There's a couple ways. One, I can just double click the form over here. And if your form isn't actually listed in a group called forms, that's okay. I'm not quite sure how it goes away, but I've seen it. Oh, it's right here. It's this little folder right here. That's the thing. Click that folder. This will change the way it's organized, either by group or just by the list. Okay, so you can either click, double click on the form here, and that'll take you back to the form, or that's what this button does right here. These two buttons will switch you back between the code view of the form and the object view of the form. So these will toggle you back and forth. All right, the next control that I want to bring on is this one right here. It's a Listbox. Whew. It's the first one on the second row. And actually, I think I want to make my form a little bit bigger because these are kind of large. And then I'm going to bring in that Listbox. Select the Listbox control, then I will drag to draw it in. Listbox. Remember, the name it comes with is a throwaway, so I'm going to call this one LST rule. So I've got the Listbox selected. I'll change it from Listbox, the name from Listbox 1, LST. I'll just call it LST rule. Put it in singular. All right. So now I would like to write some code that reads those rules off the worksheet and puts them into this form. But as with any time I'm writing code on a user form, I have to ask myself the question, what combination of object and event do I want to invoke this code? What do you think? Then talk to me in terms of English. When do I want this? When would I want that code to run? Once it puts the rules into the rule list box. Just in regular old English. When? Probably when the
user wants to see it.
When the user wants to see it. That's the truth. When the user wants to see it. When the form what? Yeah, when the form first shows up. As soon as the user says it's going to show this form, that's when I want to do it. Okay, so the clue here is I've pretty well identified the object. It's the form object. So I'm going to cover the code. Maybe I'll just click on my OK button again to go back to the code. And I'm going to pick the user form object. So I've got the command box, or the command button, my list box, and my user form. So that's the object. Now, does click? It guesses. It says, maybe you want to click when the user clicks the form. Is that really what I want? Probably not the right event. So I'm going to come over here to my event drop down. I'll pick that one. I'll just take a look at it. Which one do you think it is? Okay, activate is a pretty good, it sounds like a pretty good one. I like it. There's another one. What is it?
Initialize.
Initialize. Yeah, of these two, if you had to choose activate and initialize, which one do you think you want? Yeah, it's initialize. Here's the thing. Initialize, that event happens when the form is very first shown. It's actually just before it's shown for the first time. So when the user says show this form, however they say it, the initialize code runs, and then once that's done running, the form shows. So I can actually change the way it looks before the user ever sees it. Activate happens every time the form becomes active. So if I have two forms open, and I go back and forth between them, they get activated each time I go back to it. So initialize is the one I want. So we'll pick initialize. And it has then given me some code here for initialize. Now, it already created user form click. What do I do with that? It wouldn't hurt so much to leave it there, but I'm going to go ahead and delete it. All right, so now this is the code that's going to execute when the user form gets initialized.
My drop-down list doesn't have initialize.
Okay, so make sure. Okay, so here's the thing. These events are only the events that are relevant for the object selected. So make sure you've got the user form selected, and then you should be able to pick initialize from the list. Yeah, because these other things, they don't initialize. The form initializes. In fact, maybe the form is the only one that has an initialize event. All right. Well, let's see what it takes to add an item into the list box. Let's see. What do you think it's going to be, a property or a method? It'll be a method, yeah, because it's something I'm going to want to add, put multiple into. Actually, I could add it by a property too, but it's more complicated. Let's do the method. So here we go. The name of the list, the name of the object is LST rule. I hit dot, and it gives me my choices. Oh my gosh, it's the first one. That never happens. It's the first one you want. Add item. There it is. LST rule, add item, and then whatever I put here, the argument then is what I want to add. Hello, Master Nephi. Really, whatever I put there is what's going to show up in the form. I can now run this form, and when the user form gets initialized, this line will execute, and I should have that one item showing in my list. There it is. Pretty boring list box with only one choice. There it is. And I'll close it by pressing OK. Okay, now, I don't really want to just put that hard. I want to read it off the worksheet. So let's just go ahead and put a loop that we've written a dozen times or more in this class. Dim r as an integer, r equals 2, do until sheet, I think it's called sheet 1. Oops. Dot cells, row number r, column number 1, dot values, a zero-length string. Put next in a loop. Better actually increment r in here, r equals r plus 1. Just in case I put myself into an endless loop accidentally, I'll do events. And then I will add whatever's in column 2. Column 1 is just the number, column 2 is what has the actual values that I want to put in. So we've got a loop here. Again, it's a loop that at this point, I would expect to be comfortable reading this. I would expect you to be able to write this loop by this time. How many of you are going, I couldn't have written it as fast as you, but I think I probably could have come up with this loop? That's kind of where I hope that you are. Okay. Given this line, which is a brand new line, where we're adding it, the rest of this we've seen a few times before. Okay, so now if I run this, I should go into this loop. It should continue to add these until we've added them all. And then we should be there. So we'll go ahead and run it. F5, we'll just run it. If they're either on the form or the code that belongs to the form, F5 will just show the form. And there it is. Automatically gets a scroll bar if it needs it. I can select the item I'm interested in. No evidence of rodent or insect infestation. No birds. Turtles. Turtles, really? Turtles gets its own line. Or other animals. Now, what if I wanted to select 2 of these? Hold down the control key or something, shift what? No can do. I only get 1. Does that mean this list box is somehow deficient? No, it means that's a property. How many can be selected at a time as a property? So let's go give it a shot. Let's look at the list. I've got the list box selected here in my user form. I'm going to come look at the list of properties. And there's one called multi-select. And multi-select single, 0, is the default value. I can do multi, which would allow me to select each one individually. Click it on, click it off. I don't think anyone really likes that one. Multi-select extended is one you're used to working with. Now I can click one, scroll down, hold down shift, and select everything between them. So now I can, using my control key, I can select multiple ones, turn them on and off individually. Or I can select one, hold the shift key down, and get the whole range. Just a property that we're setting. Questions? All right, here's what I'd really like to do. I would like to bring on now another kind of control, a combo box. That's a lot to work through. Ultimately, what I'd like to have is some kind of little combo box, another drop-down that lets me choose which category of rules I want to look at. So we've got a category here, so we can't quite see these. I think the width, column width, 50. Okay, so each of these are in a category called food protection. And there's some other food protection ones that come down here a little bit later. So what I'd like to do is be able to have another list, maybe a drop-down list where you can say food protection and it will only show the items in that category. That'll help me organize things a little bit better. Shall we tackle that one? So to be able to have a list that drops down instead of just always open, it's called a combo box. So let's go ahead and add a combo box. Combo box is this tool right here. So it's the fourth tool in. I'll click that, and I'll do a click and drag to create the combo box. And again, the default name is a throwaway, so instead of combo box 1, I'm going to call this CBO category. It's a combo box, CBO combo. Category describes what's in it. Now this is a little bit trickier because it's pretty easy to load the list that has all the items in it. But if I want to, because there's a one-to-one correspondence, now I've got many rows that each have there's lots of duplicates here that I'm going to have to ignore. So, are we ready to do that? Yeah, let's do it. So here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to come back again to my list. When I initialize the form. In fact, right immediately after I've added a rule, I want to make sure that its category is in the list box. I'm scrolling through this set of data. I might as well do both things at once. So I add that rule into my list box. And now what I want to do, this is going to be a little more complex because I don't want to add it if it's already there. And there's no way to say, there's no property that says remove duplicates or something. And so I'm going to come here and I'm going to make a procedure. I'm going to make the call here, then I'm going to go write the procedure. So I'm going to call this add category. And I'm going to pass it the category, which is just the next column over. So it'll be column 3. I've got to make this procedure called add category, and I'm just going to send it the category. So I'm going to add in the rule, and then I'm going to try to add the category, but I don't want that category to add it unless it's not already there. I mean, only add it if it needs to go in. Okay, so when you make up a procedure like this, you actually have to write the procedure, so we'll do that. I'll do it right above here. Sub, add category. Now, I'm going to pass it the category that I want to add, and so I've got to create a parameter to receive it. So inside the parentheses, I declare a variable. I'll just call it cat as a string. Now, the work here is we want to add that into the list box. Well, it turns out adding an item to a list box is the same as adding it to a combo box. There's an add item method. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll add the item. The name of the object is CBO category dot add item. I'm just going to add the category. Now, what's the problem with this? Every time I add an item, I'm going to also add the category. I got to add some logic here that says, hey, let's check to make sure that it needs to be added before we just add it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at all the items that are already in the list for that drops down. We're going to scan across that, and we're going to see, do we see the category that we're trying to add in there already? And if so, get me out of here. I don't need to add it. But if I look through them all, and it's not there, we need to add it. Make sense? Here's how we do it. Again, we'll need a little loop. So I'll just declare x, then x as an integer. This one I'm going to use a for loop for. For x equals 0 to, I need some way to know how many items there are in the list. So it's probably a property. Let's take a look. CBO category dot list count. Oh, look at that. There's a list count. Now, you'll notice I'm starting at 0. The reason I'm starting at 0 is because that list is actually held in a property that is itself an array. And so it's going to start at 0. Now, if I have 10 items in my list, what do you suppose the list count says? List count property, 10 items in the list count's going to tell me what? I'll narrow it down. 0, 1, 9, 10, or 11. What do you think? It's not 9. It's not 11. There are 10 items. It's 10. Let me tell you how many items there are on the list. But the array that has those 10 items, what are the indices going to be? 0 through 9. So I don't want to go to list count. I want to go to list count minus 1. All right, all I want to do is look through this. So I want to say if the cat that I've passed in, so here's the category, if that, whatever the user gave me here, whatever the calling procedure sent here, if that is equal to the one I'm currently looking at as I'm going through this loop, so CBO category dot list, that's the one, that's the array that holds all the values that are in the list. Sub x, it's an array, I gotta tell which element I'm looking at. If those are equal to each other, then I'm gonna do something. Otherwise I'm not. What do I do if I have found a match between what I sent in to add and the list? If that item's already in the list, what does it mean? What do I do? I don't add it. Yeah, in fact, any reason to keep looking? Any reason to do anything else in this procedure? No, so what should I put here? Exit sub. I'm done. So if this is ever true, if I'm looking through all the items in this list, if it's ever true, then get me out of here. Don't need to add it. It's already there. Don't add it. But if I get through this whole loop and I've never gone inside this if statement, that means I looked through it, didn't ever find it. So I need to add the item. Well, we're in pretty good shape. Questions? Let's run it, see what we get. We've got these things loaded up here. This drop down list, I'm a little nervous because it's not showing anything. But when I drop it down, there they all are. These are all the different categories. There's a bunch of categories. Smoking regulations, food maintenance, toilet and hand washing facilities for staff. Very nice. Now I haven't tied these two together yet. I'm not entirely sure that we will today, or ever for that matter. But that's where we're headed. We now have enough code to start looking at some debugging tools. Are you ready for that? It would probably be good if your code isn't quite working yet, if you want to keep following along, to let our TA know. Ready? How many of you are going? Okay. What's your name? Cameron. Come down to second row. What's that? New little hand. Go ahead and pause. Okay, so one of the most frustrating things, if you have an error anywhere in your initialize, you don't get very good help at all. Let's suppose that I had an error here. Instead of doing until the value was equal to zero length string, I left off the equals quote quote. Syntactically it looks okay, but when I go to run this, it's going to have an error. Let's just kind of look and follow what happens. Let me try to run this, press F5. That's not what I expected. What did you mess up in your code? Same thing the student messed up. It didn't seem to work for him. Now here's this. So I want to put something here that I know is going to fail. All right, let me put this back the way it was. I'm going to add another line here just for the purpose of failing. Sheets. Sheet 2, sheet 3, let me have a sheet 2, dot select. I don't have a sheet 3, so this line should fail. Now you are used, when we have a runtime error, you have become accustomed to that line showing up in yellow and saying, you got a problem right here. That line I just wrote is going to be a problem. Look what happens when it's in the initialize of a user form. I run it, here's what I get. Subscript out of range. That doesn't sound so bad. You think maybe it'll show me the line that caused the problem. Oh no, it doesn't. And so if you have an error in the initialized code of your form, you're on your own, pal. That's really what the VBA editor is saying here. So what do? How can you possibly track it down? Here's how you do it. What you want to do is you want to put a breakpoint on the very first line of executable code. So the very first event that happens is the initialize event on the user form. So this is the right place. What's the first line of executable code? Dim R as integer? No, remember the declaration, variable declarations don't execute. I can't put a breakpoint there. So R equals 2. So if you ever have a problem, you try to run the form, it won't run. Put a breakpoint on the first line of executable code, and then run it. You're guaranteed to get there. You have to be able to get to there. And now you're going to step. Now, we've got some tools up here. Under debug, we've got 3 step controls. Step into, step over, and step out. They all do different things. Let's do step into for now. Step into is F8. Your keyboard may make you hit function F8 to actually invoke F8, but F8. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to F8. All F8 does is says run the line that's currently highlighted, and then wait on the next line. So I'll press F8 again, and that tells me that was the error. I could see the line. When I tried to execute that one, that had the error. That's what you have to do to track down the line that is actually giving you the error if it's happening in the initialize of your form. It otherwise won't show it to you. You got to go step by step, slow enough that you can realize what line is it on. That was the one. Come back and figure it out.
What was the rationale behind R2 as the breakpoint started playing it?
So why do we put the breakpoint here? And the answer is this is the first line of executable code. I'm in my user form initialize, and it's the first line. The dim, I can't put on the dim because the dim doesn't execute. Dims get processed before it starts running. And then that's the first line where we're doing something. That's where I want to put the breakpoint. Typically, here's what will happen for me, is I'll think, I'm really comfortable with all this code. I think my problem's probably somewhere after this. And I'll put it down after the first statement. And I'll still get the error, and then I have to remember, okay, that's right. It could be anywhere before. I want to put that breakpoint on the first executable line. Okay, I'm going to just delete this line or comment it out. I don't really need it. It was just there to create that error. All right, moving on again, let's talk about some of the different things we can do with stepping. Okay, so F8 will just step into, and I'm about to tell you what step into means, why it's called step into. It executes the line that we're on, takes me to the next line and waits. Execute the line that we're on, takes me to the next line and waits. Now this one's different. Add category. When I run add category, what's it going to do? It's going to. That's a procedure I wrote. It's going to come up here and start going through this. Step into will step into that procedure. Watch what happens. I hit F8, and it goes into my add category procedure, and it goes through this line at a time. And then it comes back out. So step 8, F8 will step into that procedure. Go through this. Okay, you see step into. Now, yeah.
If when I run mine, it's not stopping at the breakpoint, do you know why that would be? Like, it doesn't give you the yellow.
If you run it and it's not stopping you at the breakpoint, you must not be running it. Or, so right here you're already running, so hit stop, and then hit F5. There we go. Yeah, so if you're already in the code, it will continue. When you hit F5, it will continue from where you are. Okay, let's suppose you're walking down the sidewalk, minding your own business. You're not even texting. You're paying attention. You're looking down and you realize there's something I don't want to step in on the sidewalk. What are you going to do? You're going to step over it. You don't want to step in that. You're going to step over it. That has nothing to do with what step over means. In fact, it's exactly backwards. I want to point that out because it sounds step over means like, oh yeah, don't do that. You would think that if I said step over, let's get right down here. So here's the one that I would normally run this sub-procedure. I've got something called step over. Debug, step over. What does step over do? It doesn't skip it. It doesn't say, oh, you know what, this line, I don't really want to run this line, move to the next one. What it says is, oh yeah, you're about to make a call to a sub-procedure. I don't want to see it. Just run the whole thing. It's still running it. It's just not stepping through it. See what I'm saying? So if I hit step over, which is Shift F8, then it will run that whole sub-procedure. It will run that whole sub-procedure and take me to the next line. So you want step over. In fact, you almost always really want step over. So for me, when I step, it's always step over, unless I'm thinking, wait a minute, I need to step into that sub-procedure, then I'll use F8. So if I use Shift F8, I will never see myself actually go through out of this procedure. Well, until I'm finished with this procedure, then I'll come out. Let's suppose I stepped into it and then either realized, oh, wait a minute, I didn't mean to step in here, or I've seen enough. That's what my other step command is for. I've got one called step out. That says, oh, you know what, I'm down here. Just finish running this and take me out to the next line after whatever called this. Step out. Control-Shift F8 will step out and take me to the next line. F8, F8, F8. I go into that. Whoops, I don't mean to be in there. Control-Shift F8. And it just finishes that off and takes me in. Those are the 3 steps. Step into, step over, step out. Questions? Okay. Next debugging tool is, how am I going to kind of look at values that I have available to me? Let me go ahead and step back into that. Okay, so I'm right here in this sub-procedure. And, you know, I kind of want to know what the category's list count is. Right now, what is it? Several things I can do. I can highlight it and hover over it. I can copy it to my immediate window and paste it. But there's something else. And here we go. I can right-click this and choose Add Watch. If I add a watch, what I'm saying is, you know what? I want to see this thing a lot. I want to look at this expression often, many times. I want to just leave it on the screen. And as it changes, update its value. That's what a watch expression is. And it can just be a single variable, or it could be this whole expression. It could be CBO category list count -1. Maybe that's what I want to watch. Right-click that and say Add Watch. Bring up this expression here. There's some other ways I can do it. I can actually make it take me into break mode. I don't want to do anything fancy. I just want to watch it. Say OK. And it will add a watch window. Here it is. Why is my watch window all the way up there? I can't move the watch window. You should zoom out. I still can't move the watch window. That's a good place for it, right up there. So it's showing right here. Here's the expression. That's the current value of it. And as I step through this, if it ever changes, I will see it change. There's 4. It's going to go out. There's 5. It added 1, added 5. Now it's out of context because I've moved out here and it's no longer defined. It's defined as being in the add category context. I want to see what value it has when I'm in add category. I can put any number of watch expressions that I want. That's really handy. I can just see. In fact, that could be really handy as you're working on Boggle. Folks, if you have arrays, or an array declared as a variable. Oh no! Here, let me show you this. It doesn't do much in the watch expression, but there's something else you can add. I might not be able to. Hey, I gotta close this. I don't know how to move this if I can't get to the handles. Darn it. Good guess. Let's try Alt F4. Oh, that was. Thank you. Give yourself a gold star. Okay, there's another thing that we can add that can be really helpful, especially if you're working with arrays. Alt F11. Alt plus to zoom in. So I'm going to come here and choose View. Here's that watch window. I can toggle that watch window on and off here. There's also this one called the Locals window. If I have the Locals window showing, any variables that I have locally declared, they're right here. So here's the one I have declared R. It's going to show me the value of R, whatever it is, as long as my code is running. If I have an array here, I'll get a little plus like this, and it will expand out. I can see everything in that array. Would that be handy while you're working on Big Boggle? Very handy. And so these are the main tools for debugging that you're going to want to use. Setting breakpoints, stepping into, stepping over, and stepping out, and then having ways to look at what's in memory at that different point in your code. So you have watch expressions and you have your locals window. Questions on these tools? Textbook's going to give you a much fuller description of all the other tools, but these are the main ones that you're going to want to work with as you're debugging. All right, let's look at one more thing, and that is how to trap an error. All right, for this one, folks, I don't want you to do this along with me. I want you just to watch. We've got 5 minutes to cover this. I'm going to post this code. You'll have access to it. I'm going to insert a module. Let's just suppose that I had a sub-procedure called change tab color. I'm going to pass it a sheet name as a string. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, out of all the sheets, the one named sheet name, I'm going to say it's got a tab property. Tab has a color property. And I'm going to set that equal to VBB red. So you give me a sheet name, I will turn the tab red. It's not a very interesting sub-procedure. I'm going to go ahead and call this, a sub-procedure to call this test change tab color. So I'll call this, I will give it a sheet name, and I'll run it. So here's my worksheet right now. It's got no color to it, very boring. I want that to be colorful. Run that sub-procedure. Run the right sub-procedure. Module 1, I want to run this sub-procedure. Go back and look at my tab. There it is. It's now red. Isn't that beautiful? Now, what's going to happen if I pass it a sheet that does not exist? I'm going to get runtime error. Runtime error number 9, subscript out of range. You don't want your user ever to see this message. Because what do they have? They have 3 buttons that are all equally bad. And that's just going to terminate. Debug, well, that's actually worse. They're going to come and look at your code, and that's going to be like, oh my gosh, what have I done? They're going to get help. Is this going to help them? Not at all. Chances are it won't even help you. So you don't want your user ever coming here. So here's what we're going to do. The book talks about several different approaches to handling these kinds of errors. It's a runtime error. It's an error that doesn't go bad until you actually try to execute it. Syntactically, this is beautiful. This line is perfect. But I'm trying to activate a sheet or change a sheet that doesn't exist, and so it can't accomplish it. The book talks about several approaches to this. I'm going to show you the one that I prefer, and kind of the only one I'll expect you to be really familiar with. I might have given you a note on the midterm study guide to be a little more familiar with something. But here we go. I'm going to say, on error, resume next. Ooh. This line just says, if there's an error, skip it and move on. This is a really dangerous thing to put in your code. You're saying, you know what, I'm not sure why it might fail, but if it does, I guess it wasn't that important anyway. Just keep going. You don't want to just put this at the top of your code and hope for the best. That's a really bad idea. You would prevent your users from ever seeing an error message, but you don't know what's going wrong. So if I run this now, no error. It didn't change anything, but there's no error. Because that's really dangerous, I want to localize the damage I'm doing with on error resume next just to the line that I think might be suspect. There might be 2 or 3 lines that things could go wrong. I'm going to localize this. So I'm going to turn off this error handler that I'm building by saying this. On error, go to 0. In the early days of BASIC, we had to number all of our lines. You write a line, number 10. Declare a variable. Number 20, variable equals hello. Number 30, print the variable. You have to write these lines in. And if you wanted to make a loop, the way you did it was go to. You have an if statement that go to 20. You tell it to go to line number 20. Just like this, go to a line number. But the very first legal line number was line number 1. It was impossible to go to line number 0. It's not a valid line number. What I'm doing here, I'm saying, listen, if there's an error, do the impossible. I'm telling VB abuse that you can't possibly succeed at, and so it falls back to say I'm just going to behave with my normal event, my normal error. It's a really weird way to say it, but that's what this line means. It means handle errors as usual.
So you write that after the resume next.
As usual from here. Yeah, it should be after. So between the on error resume next and the on error go to 0, we are saying there may be a line that I'm expecting that could fail in here. And if it does, we'll behave with it in a specific way. Now, it might be that if it fails, it's okay. Like I'm saying, I want to delete this sheet. The primary reason a sheet won't delete is why? It's already gone. It's kind of crazy. It fails because the very condition that I'm trying to achieve was already there, and so the code fails. So sometimes sometimes ignoring it and moving on is okay. But most often, you'll do this. You will say, hey, let me put a break point right here around this. Okay, so the error has happened. I haven't finished executing the subprocedure. I'm going to print err.number. I can actually probe now. I have access to that error object. I can look and see what happened. Error number, and there's a description. Runtime was a subscript out of error. Or subscript out of range. So I can say, oh, if it was error number 9, I know exactly what's going on here. If err.number equals 9, this was subscript out of range. I know what that means. It's a bad sheet name. Then I'll do something. Else I'll do something else. What am I going to do with error number 9? Message box. This is probably a worse message. If I had more time, I'd give them a better message here. But sheet not there. But the point is, the code is going to continue to execute. I'm in control of what happens when this. I can have any code here I want. Otherwise, maybe just a message box. Error would be a great one. And then end. We'll end the code. We don't know what happened. You might put a message here that says, call your programmer. You come and email me, and I'll just come over and help you. I don't know where this program's going. So now, if I run this, this is not the runtime error. This is me handling the error. Code's still running. All right, we're okay. So this is what an error trap looks like. I say, hey, if there's an error, move on. Whatever line I expect to have to happen, then I take a look at what error actually happened and decide what to do accordingly. There could be 3 or 4 things that could happen. I could have several else-ifs here that use a case statement that examine it, decide what to do, and then move on. So we want to use our debugging tools to get rid of as many bugs as we can. There may be some that we can't get rid of, and those we want to trap so that they don't interrupt the progress of the user. Questions? We'll pick up with user forums when we get together on Wednesday. Thanks for coming. Class dismissed.